Before we get started, I want to invite you to support the Business of Politics show by becoming a member of the Startup Caucus Network. For just $10 a month, you'll become a part of our community that's changing the culture of Republican campaigning through innovation. Visit businessofpoliticspodcast.com/join to learn more.
What we've seen in our testing is that personalization works. When you are tailoring content for what that person cares about, you're going to get better results.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, the home of campaign tech innovation on the right. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, you're joining in on a conversation with entrepreneurs, operatives, and experts who make professional politics happen. Today, we're speaking with Ryan Lyk, CEO of WinRed, the official secure payments technology designed to help Republican candidates and committees raise more money and win. Since launching in 2019, WinRed has processed more than $3 billion. Ryan has been with WinRed from day one and became CEO in March of this year. Before that, he was working on the agency side, helping candidates and campaigns with their digital strategies. During our conversation, we learn about WinRed's latest features, what campaigns can do to take advantage of them, and what Ryan sees on the horizon for online fundraising. Ryan, the Biden campaign has recently begun experimenting with a fundraising platform other than ActBlue for its digital marketing. Sent out an email the other week without the ActBlue link, and they've said that they're going to explore more options. So explain for our listeners what a seismic shift this is and how Democratic campaigns do digital fundraising.
It's certainly a very interesting thing to watch and not something we were expecting, but going to be eagerly keeping our eyes on this. I assume most of your listeners are familiar with ActBlue. Just in case they aren't, it's, the behemoth fundraising platform that's really our counterpart on the left. And, ActBlue came to prominence mostly because they were, one of the first to really get in this space about 20 years ago. And they provided a bunch of high-powered features back then, such as the ability to fundraise together, which is one of the reasons, Democrats are so good at working together and getting small donors connected with campaigns all over the country. They also have donor profiles where a donor can come and save their information, their credit card, and they're able to return to any page and give with a lot less friction than having to, take out your card each time and go through that. And so, on the heels of those like high power features, plus probably a bunch of other things that they would, say are happening behind the scenes, they really rose to prominence. They sort of cornered the market. And for a very long time, they were the standard. You didn't really touch it, right? Everybody was using them. So to see them testing something else out is certainly a pretty fascinating development there. And, it's hard to exactly pinpoint why it's happening, but there's a couple things we can sort of glean from the talk we saw from political operatives on the left on Twitter. And the biggest thing is that there seems to be a perception that ActBlue has slowed down quite a bit. They had a new CEO come in not too long ago. They laid off a bunch of staff. And, there's been a bunch of calls on Twitter since this news came out, specifically pointing out the rate of development. It seems like WinRed is, developing faster, which is obviously great news for us. And so when you look at that situation and you're the Biden campaign and you're going to do everything you can to win on this next cycle here, they're probably doing their due diligence to say, look, if this is all true, then maybe there's a better alternative out there. And so what they did is they sent an email that was splitting with a program called Fast Action, which is owned by NGP Van. NGP Van, for your listeners who may not be familiar with them, is sort of this conglomerate of this like VC-backed, tech world on the left. They've acquired a bunch of different platforms and sort of merged into one. They're trying to be this, campaign in a box sort of setup. It's a very different model than ActBlue, where they're specializing on one specific piece of the marketing process, namely payment processing. And so it's really interesting to see these two go head to head together. And I think at a fundamental level, it really shows, from a business perspective, you just can't ever get complacent, right? Perhaps ActBlue sort of took their market position for granted. They thought that, everybody was always going to constantly use them and they didn't have to go out and earn that business. And if that's the case, then clearly there was a fault in that way of thinking. And it's something we take very seriously at WinRed. It's actually baked into our core values to constantly be improving and always making sure that every day we wake up and we go out to earn the business that we have and earn the market share that we have. So where does this go? That's kind of the main question. My prediction is ActBlue wins. And there's a few different reasons for that. But I think really what it comes down to is some of the things I mentioned before. they've got this massive amount of donor profiles that are on their platform, and it's really hard to recreate that very quickly somewhere else. I don't know enough about Fast Action and what their donor profile situation looks like, but I know that no major campaign over there has really used it. And so could Fast Action accumulate a bunch of donor profiles? Certainly over time, but that would take a lot of work and effort from the party for them to be able to reach that, critical mass. So ActBlue certainly has a level up there. And then we went and we looked at both the pages that were sent out and sort of did a comparison of the different features that both pages have. And look, Fast Action has a little bit to be desired there. They didn't have Apple Pay, for example, on the page. There weren't any upsells, which is, an additional action you can prompt donors to opt into after they've made their initial donation on the page. And if the Biden campaign's looking at, the total amount of money generated every time somebody comes and visits one of their pages, then you have to look at, all components of it. What's the opt-in rate? How much money are they giving? How many, upsells are they opting into? All that stuff, right? To sort of determine what's that dollar per session of, everybody who comes to their pages. If they don't win, if ActBlue doesn't win, I think that's where this gets really interesting because, one other thing I mentioned that sort of brought ActBlue to prominence and something that, we focus a lot on as well is the ability to fundraise together. There's a lot of talk always, every cycle, about how much more small dollar Democrats raise and how much more hard dollars they raise, right, in their candidates' accounts versus PACs and stuff. And a lot of that's made possible because of the features that they have that allow you to fundraise together. They're really good at having, you come and give to a senator and then they're directing you to another senator somewhere else or a challenger or, organization, something like that. This was part of the reason WinRed came together, and we've made a lot of progress on this on our side. Major committees are doing a lot of this as well to get their donors connected to their key districts around the country. But look, if their volume on the left is sort of fracturing and they're not all using ActBlue anymore, it's really hard to say what that means for this component of fundraising. Is there an impact? Is there less sharing? Is there less teamwork happening? And that could have, pretty big impacts for their side.
Yeah, if I had to guess at what's gone here with absolutely no inside knowledge, obviously, it's that there's some small p internal politics going on of folks wanting either ActBlue to up their game, add on some new features, and this was kind of a wake-up call, or major pressure from NGP van world that, where there's a lot of money being invested on the Biden campaign to say, hey, just give us a try, something like that. And so they did it as a test. I think it would be a huge mistake by the Democrats, not that they need my advice, to abandon the network effects of ActBlue, because as we know, payment processing is a pretty straightforward technological challenge. It's that network effect of the millions of saved profiles that is their key advantage. And so I think it would be a tactical mistake on their part, a strategic mistake, in fact, on their part to abandon ActBlue. So I'm curious to see that play out, but that would certainly be a big shift in political fundraising. Ryan, it was reported that one of the growing frustrations on the left with ActBlue is their lack of new features, specifically compared to WinRed. So that must have been a good shout out. What are those features that Republicans have thanks to WinRed and Democrats don't?
Yeah, it was very nice to see some of the chatter that reference us specifically and crediting us with developing a lot. And look, this year we've been very busy putting out a bunch of high power features ahead of next cycle. There's a misconception that payment processing is as simple as, when you go to the grocery store and you swipe your credit card and you don't really think much more about it. But in fact, when it comes to political fundraising, there's a whole bunch of depth to it. And it's really important that when you're looking at these platforms, you consider everything they're doing, from the features that they have, the data management that they have, how this integrates with your systems, all that stuff, right? It makes
compliance is such a big thing too.
Exactly, right? You don't want to cause headaches, right? You want to make it smooth and easy for people as well. And so we've been very busy ahead of this next cycle. There's one thing we've sort of learned in this business, which is everything operates around, the 2-year cycle, of course. And when you roll out new features, you need time for people to adopt them. You don't just push something out and everybody starts suddenly using that instantly. And especially here where you've got people who are doing a certain marketing flow. They have systems in all these agencies and big organizations of how they do their digital fundraising. And when you give them a new tool, they have to consider, how does that fit into what they're already doing? Do they like it? Does it work? All that sort of stuff. And so it takes time. It's important to get stuff out ahead of time. And we're all working backwards from the next election to make sure our side has ample time to implement a lot of these things. Some of the big highlights from this last year that we've pushed, so the biggest thing this summer we deployed was what we call video pages. Video pages is a new page type we created in WinRed where you can embed a video or a live stream on the page. And unlike other pages where when you donate, you get redirected to an upsell or some other page if they want to redirect or something like that, with video pages, it's more seamless. The donor actually stays on the page that has that video playing. So it's perfect for things like live streams. We've seen this used for rallies, debates, candidate announcements, stuff of that nature, where you can send this out to your supporters. They can watch live as with what's happening and they can donate. And once they donate, they're not being redirected away from that page. They're staying there and they're being served upsells. So they can continue to donate and donate and donate again. Had been pretty widely used so far. We've had several debates and a bunch of big events that this has been implemented for. The numbers have been pretty promising so far, and we're starting to see an uptick and increase there. And like I said, I haven't seen ActBlue have anything like this yet, so it's definitely something we have that they don't. One program I want to talk about is our merchandise program. I've never seen a merchandise program built directly within ActBlue. There's some vendors, but they're separate companies, and that's completely different. For us, we spent a lot of time really perfecting how merchandise works with our platform. And, it's a pretty exciting thing for your listeners. The way it generally works is a lot of this is on demand. So what that means is when a campaign wants to sell merchandise, whether it's a t-shirt or hat or bumper sticker, in the past, they had to go out and buy a bunch in bulk. They had to get a bunch of different sizes and put an upfront investment. And then they would go and they would try to sell it to their pages. But normally what would happen is they're just giving it away to their interns or whatever, because you're trying to guess what the demand is, what items are going to take off. With our program, what has changed is that you can come and only pay for what you actually sell to your donors. When a donor comes and makes a donation for a t-shirt, you're paying for that t-shirt in real time as that purchase, that donation is happening. So it allows every campaign of every level to have a merchandise program. We provide a free storefront for every single campaign on the platform. And instead of going out and doing a bunch of bulk buying and spending money that way, we're making it much more easy and scalable for every single organization to use on the platform. Upsells, I talked about a little bit earlier, where it's an additional action that a donor can make after they give. And, ActBlue has upsells, and it's hard to know exactly how customizable they are and everything without being in the platform. But there's one component to our upsells I want to highlight, which is the panel upsell. The panel upsell is an extremely powerful upsell placement that we created a while back. And the way it works is when a donor lands on the panel upsell, they are shown a bunch of different actions all on one screen that they can go through, and they can click with one click and complete every single action. The most common way it's used is to slate to other candidates. So consider you're the NRSC and you've got a panel upsell of all your Senate incumbents or your top races, and you have a donor show up on that. They're able to scroll through and just click, $5 to this candidate, $5 to this candidate, and on and on and on. It's extremely effective. And again, I haven't seen ActBlue have anything like this. One other item I want to mention is the money pledge. So most pages, most programs have some sort of recurring program where a donor can opt in for a monthly or whatever recurring donation. What we created a couple years back was the money pledge. And the money pledge is a one-time future gift that a donor can opt into when they're making a donation. So if I come to your page and I give $50, I can check a box and say, I want to give $50 again at a future date that's set by the campaign. It's typically used around certain events or deadlines, whether it's end of month, quarter, a candidate's birthday, primary day, election day, whole bunch of creative ways that this can be used. And again, it just adds additional complexity and options to the platform. So those are some of the big features we have and some of the stuff we released recently. I want to talk though about what's coming next, because we have some really exciting features that we're finalizing. And
I can't believe there's still stuff left in the tank after all of that, because obviously where you're lapping the Democrats with functionality, and excited to hear more about what's next.
Yeah, we're really excited. We've been working for several months on some stuff that we're getting ready to deploy very imminently here. And we put this under an umbrella that we've been referring to as personalization features. There's three major features in this bucket. And I want to kind of preview this with your listeners, because like I said, we're getting ready to launch some of this, the first phase of this very shortly. And over the next couple months, we're going to be rolling out a bunch of stuff here that's going to be really exciting. And frankly, I think it's going to completely change the fundraising game for our side and add just an absurd amount of depth and complexity to what our campaigns are able to do. So, in our research and just listening to our users and what's going on out there, there's a lot of focus on acquiring new donors. Everybody's trying to grow the donor base. And when we think about that, we like to think about what's our role in that piece, right? We're not placing ads. We're not really sending the emails or texts or anything. We're the landing page. And we try to think about our piece in that funnel and what we can build and what we can optimize for. And treating a person who's a new donor to you, who's never given to you differently than other people is certainly a no-brainer, right? So we wanted to focus on solving that. Everybody's trying to provide a better experience for their donors. And we believe a big piece of that is personalization and customizing the content for them. So it's a better experience for them. All of this to say, what we've seen in our testing is that personalization works. When you are tailoring content for what that person cares about, you're going to get better results. So we really wanted to double down on this, and that's why we're focusing on these things. So there's 3 big features we're going to be launching very shortly here, and they all revolve around the idea that we have this donor flow on the platform, which is a lead form to a donation page to an upsell. Lead form can be used, we refer to them as petitions. It can be used to say, support this issue or that issue, or take this survey or poll. Person redirects them to donation page, they give, and then they go into your upsell flows and yada, yada. It's a very linear flow currently. There's not a lot of depth there. And what we wanted to do is completely change that. So the first piece of that is what we call petition pathways. With petition pathways, when they fill out that lead generation form, that first piece of the flow, you're able to dynamically direct the person to a donation page based on who that person is, based on certain attributes about that person, whether that person has given to you before or not. You can put new donors on one page, maybe with lower amounts or with a gift or something like that to entice them to give for that first time, versus returning donors. Maybe you want to ask them for more or something to that effect, right? Because you already have some sort of relationship with them. You can include custom fields on your petition page, like a straw poll or an issue poll or something like that, and then dynamically direct those people to different donation pages based on the issue or the candidate or whatever option they chose, right? So really, instead of going from one to one, you're now going from one petition page to potentially a bunch of different donation pages. Part 2, the donation page itself. When a donor comes and looks at a donation page currently, all the buttons are the same for everybody who comes and visits. There's some ways to manipulate it through URL parameters, but it gets really complicated and it's not very accessible.
And we're talking about the donation amount buttons.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yep, exactly. So you see $5, $10, $15, etc. What we're changing very shortly is to give our users the ability to dynamically change those amounts, again, based on who the user is. So if a donor comes and their average gift is $5, you probably want lower amounts on the page because that's what that person typically gets. Maybe you're trying to nudge them to $7 or $8, but you want it to be relative to the amount that the person typically donates on these pages. Versus if somebody comes and their average gift is $50, then you should absolutely be shooting higher with that person for, showing them $50 or $55 or, something closer to that. So again, it's tailoring that experience for who the user is. And then the last piece of this that we're going to be rolling out early next year is what we call upsell pathways. So very similar to petition pathways. This is the other side of the donation page, the end of the flow, where after the donor gives and you bring them into the upsell flow, instead of everybody going to the same upsell and the same upsell after that, et cetera, you're now able to dynamically change which upsell they go to based upon whom they are. So what that means is when a donor comes and gives for the very first time, you can send them to one upsell or you can send them to a different upsell. If they are in your district, perhaps you want to show them a volunteer upsell. You want to get them engaged with your campaign versus someone who's out of state. They're probably not going to volunteer. So you want to, continue to ask them for additional donations. If they've answered a question a certain way or whether they have a donor profile or, stuff of that nature, right? So when you look at all this, you're taking that linear flow of petition to donation to upsell, and you're adding the ability for that web to really expand where people can go down a bunch of different paths that are very relevant to who they are as an individual.
Yeah, and this personalization is so key in our modern data-driven marketing. And obviously, there's been a lot of conversation both on this show and other forums about treating donors with more respect and building more sustainable relationships. Personalization is one of those ways that they're going to be able to do that through the new features that you're rolling out. What are some of the other features that you've introduced to help campaigns treat their donors with more respect and build those relationships?
On this topic, it's important to understand what people mean when they talk about treating donors with respect. There's been a bunch of really interesting thought pieces out there from folks in the space that I definitely encourage everybody to read that sort of weighs in on this and gives their take on this and what they see, whether it has to do with the tactics that are used, the content that's used on marketing, or the volume of messages that are out there. There's a bunch of directions this piece can go in. For our part, it's really important for us that we make sure what donors are doing on a platform is very clear to donors. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that donor experience. So when a donor comes to a page, having what they're giving be very clear to them, having their receipt be very clear to them. If they make a mistake, having options for them to address it. We spend a lot of time on our donor support center, which is sort of our one-stop shop for donors to come and get help on the platform with anything they need, whether it's managing their account, if they have questions about where their donation's going or to whom they gave, or if they accidentally opted into a recurring donation or a money pledge, or they want to stop an existing recurring donation. We have this donor support center that's able to help them. And we spent a lot of time this summer equipping that with new functionality just to make it more efficient, allow our agents to be able to, identify the donor and help them out, and just make sure that everybody who comes our way, we're able to serve them there. But, you hit the nail on the head. The personalization piece to me is going to really change the game here, because previously everybody got the same message. Everybody got the same content on the page. And yeah, in email systems, there was some segmentation happening in there, and that stuff's very important. But when they get to the page, it's the same experience for everybody currently. And so what we're doing is allowing, every organization to completely tailor that to the person. And that's certainly going to, show the donors what they want to see. And that's going to, boost performance and give the donor a better experience.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Ryan Lyk, CEO of WinRed, about the world of online fundraising in Republican politics. Ryan, even with all of the improvements and features that you've introduced, you mentioned that the onus is still on the campaigns to generate leads, to grow our donor pool. What are you seeing that campaigns and committees are doing to turn more supporters into donors?
There's a lot happening in the space currently, and there's been some really interesting insights that we've learned about what's happening here. But when we think about the new donor problem, we sort of think about it in two ways, right? Like you said, what are campaigns doing? What is in their control? And then what's our part? What's our role in this? And we've talked about our role. I think the personalization. And
that's your constant challenge with users, especially candidates, not understanding what they have control over versus what WinRed has control over.
Yeah, exactly. Our role is to handle landing pages, but also we want to be helpful and part of the conversation. And we always are, whether it's providing insights or data, what are we seeing, what are we learning, and making sure that organizations, understand all that. That's a very, very big piece of it. But on the campaign side, there's been some interesting developments, I'd say, in terms of, growing the donor pool. There's a misconception that the donor pool hasn't grown at all. And maybe it hasn't grown to the degree everybody would like, of course, but there has been some good growth there. So we just finished the 2023 campaigns this year. And it's really interesting when you look at the numbers for state level campaigns that operate in this cycle, Virginia and Kentucky, et cetera. We looked at how many donors came to these groups on the platform and what percent of those donors were new to WinRed. And the number was pretty great. It was 17%. 17% of donors to these state level candidates were brand new to WinRed. We had never seen them before. When I typically do a poll like that, it's much lower. We're looking at this sort of number. So it's encouraging to see, and it sort of shows us that state level, there's something there, right? They're talking to different people. They're sort of a gateway to getting different users engaged with the platform. And it's something that I think we need to take very seriously. And we've made great strides bringing WinRed to states across the country and getting them more acclimated into the platform there. But getting them more, involved with digital programs is certainly a challenge that we're, constantly working to address. But there's a reason to do it, right? Because that's a way we can bring new donors into the platform. I want to highlight, new Speaker Johnson and his team. A lot happened with the speaker's race and how that all went down, of course. But when he, secured that election, we looked at the numbers and the percent of donors that were coming and giving in to him, or pages that were splitting with him. And what we saw was that donors who were giving to pages that included him on the page were converting at a higher rate than donors who weren't. So with that, and we're specifically looking at new donors here that WinRed hasn't seen before. So what that shows us is that new donors, seem to have a good perception of the new speaker. They like him, and they're willing to give at higher rates to pages that are splitting with them. One other thing I want to mention is video pages. We talked about that earlier as one of our new features we deployed over the summer. When we, first launched this and it was used around debate time for the first debate, 20% of donors who gave on those pages were brand new to WinRed, which is pretty incredible. About 45% was new to the campaign that they were giving to as well. So sort of shows us that video pages has a little bit different of an audience. The time on page was much higher than, standard donation pages, which makes sense, right? They're watching an event, but also people who weren't necessarily giving before were willing to give at a higher rate than on traditional pages as well, which is, an important development and something that, I hope organizations continue to build into their marketing programs.
Yeah, I think even just having that data of who is a new donor is really important, because this is something we ask ourselves all the time when we go do these list rentals or list exchanges. Are we just fishing from the same pool of donors? And I think an overlooked role of candidates kind of on the different spectrums are bringing new people into the pool, so or into the donor pool. And so you've those local candidates where you might have a more personal relationship with the candidate and the donor. Bringing more people into the ecosystem is really important. Then you look at the top of the ticket. You've got these candidates out there who have to reach a certain donor threshold to be on the debate stage, and that's bringing new people in that may not be, obviously very active, but they may not be donors. And so once we get them to do that behavior, it's so important. And Ryan, one of the strategies I'm pushing more campaigns and organizations towards is adopting a creator economy style approach to fundraising, similar to what we see with paid subscriptions on Substack or exclusive updates via Patreon. How are you thinking about bringing creator economy style tools into WinRed?
It's certainly a natural next step for fundraising. And the good news is a lot of the pieces that organizations would need to be able to do something like this are already on the platform. And that's great. We're talking having recurring programs set up, being able to offer merchandise or some sort of gifts to your people as part of their subscription. Video pages can certainly be a piece of this. And, we've even seen an increased usage in password protected pages where in order to access the page, you have to have the password. And that was a feature that was created because people wanted to keep a page private before it was public, right before an announcement or something like that. And it became part of the marketing flow for a lot of campaigns out there. And so when you think about all this stuff, you can certainly piece what, creator style program would look like together on the platform. We have this conversation with a lot of folks about, look, if you're going to opt people into a $50 a month donation, give them something for it. Do a monthly Zoom call with the candidate, or if, or a candidate or someone on your team who can give a policy update or a political update or something like that. Send them a special newsletter. And, I've seen pieces of this exist out there. I can't say I've seen, like a wholesale program necessarily take off. But I'm hopeful that that's, being worked on, or that's something that's going to start to pop up more and more, because I think you're right. That's exactly where people can build a better relationship with their donors and take more advantage of those recurring programs that already exist by, continuing to communicate with them and continuing to provide value for the recurring contribution that they're, already giving you.
Yeah, I think too many campaigns are sleeping on this opportunity because they're afraid of the commitment or the work that might be involved. But really, it's just repurposing the stuff that you're already doing as a campaign for your donors and packaging it for them. So I hope we'll see more people take advantage of this, because we know our voters, our donors are starting to get this from everyone, from the podcasts that they listen to the creators that they follow. What are you guys thinking about in terms of incorporating artificial intelligence into WinRed? I think there's some clear opportunities. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are as well.
Yeah, AI, definitely a fun topic. And I want to preface with I'm no expert in this space. You've had some previous guests. I know Tom Newhouse came on and talked quite a bit about it. It's a fascinating conversation with him, and he spent a lot of time thinking about this piece of it. But I view AI in sort of two components. There's and I'm sure there are better technical terms I'm about to say that more smarter people know.
I think we're all trying to figure this out together.
Yeah. There's the content creation piece of it, the language piece, which is your chat GPTs, right? That kind of stuff where you're, it's more fluid. It's more like a conversational piece. And there's more traditional data machine learning component that's more behind the scenes. That's, been at work for quite a while in various spaces, including fundraising. So on the content creation, it's interesting. We don't have any immediate plans for what this looks like, but I know there's a lot that's happening, and I've heard some pretty good anecdotes about the performance of this, whether it's using something like a chat GPT for copywriting from more of, an efficiency mindset of maybe you give it some bullet points and you have it flush out a fundraising email. You go in and you tweak it and make it good, right? You're speeding up the time you spend on this. That's a pretty important piece. And if everybody can cut down a certain percentage of time they're spending on copywriting, landing page, copywriting, advertising, copywriting, et cetera, it's really important. I think getting variations of what you're doing, this is where this can be really helpful as well. Here's a fundraising email, change a couple things, right? Kind of taking that approach. So you're able to test out at scale a little more efficiently. That's how we learn. That's how we get insights and figure out, what's working, what we need to do next. For our part, on the data piece of it, this is where a lot of what we're doing right now is sort of laying the foundation for where AI could be a piece of it. So this personalization stuff we're talking about where, right, again, you're able to dynamically direct a user through the flow. That's right for you to have some sort of smart algorithm that comes in and says, this person should go down this path because of these reasons that, it's going to perform better, right? So I look at what we're doing right now in the sense that we're getting ready for us to start to test something like that to be determined what exactly that looks like and how effective it is. But it's important that you're keeping an eye towards that as this stuff develops and becomes more accessible.
Yeah. And I really think that given all of the personalization that we need and the content creation that comes with that, with your new features, having some sort of generative AI capacity within that is really important. Of course, is not as simple as just setting Chat GPT loose because they have pretty unfriendly policies towards political use cases. And so it's an interesting challenge, but I think it's certainly a co-pilot as we generate the content we need for online fundraising. We're obviously facing some challenging times in the online fundraising space and lots of different reasons for why that may or may not be happening. You're sitting at WinRed on top of a lot of data and have a unique perspective. So what's your outlook for online fundraising during the 2024 cycle?
The big prediction I have on this is that it starts to rebound in a big way. I think that a lot of the downfall in the last couple of years had to do with the economy. If you sort of look at fundraising trends on our side as well as on ActBlue, you see similar drops. You see that this is sort of a universal problem where fundraising has gone down. And unlike, the past where campaigns were less reliant on small dollar giving and more so on, large dollar giving, small dollar giving is certainly going to follow the economy much closer than large dollar giving is going to. And I think we're seeing that really play out. So as the economy, hopefully rebounds, I think you start to see that fundraising begins to pick up. Now, it might not really come into full effect in 2024 cycle. This might be more something in 2026 where it's a midterm, right? And it's going to be down relative to 24 probably. But what I'm expecting is for it to beat expectations, which is a good thing. So it's cyclical. It goes up and down, and hopefully we're back on the upswing there. I also think personalization, of course, just to talk about that one last time, is going to be a big piece of this. We've never really had anything like this on these fundraising platforms, certainly that I've never seen. I haven't seen anything from the left or any other platform that we've worked with that has features quite, quite this in depth. And so I'm really excited to see where it goes. And look, we're making a big bet on this. If it works and it boosts performance across the board, that's going to contribute a lot to improving fundraising overall for next year as well.
Well, my thanks to Ryan Lyk for a great conversation. Keep up with all of the latest news from WinRed at their website, winred.com. Be on the lookout for those new features that are coming out imminently. And if this episode made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, and you're hearing about these features for the first time, so that this is the only place you would have heard that, all we ask is that you share it with a friend or colleague. You look smarter in the process. More people find out about the show. It's a win-win all around. Remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. You can also sign up for email updates on our website at businessofpoliticspodcast.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. The Business of Politics show is produced by Advocacy Content Kitchen, a media production studio.